Welcome everyone to another episode of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, John Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, the time has finally arrived for the My Hero Academia What If Deku Was a Power Ranger movie special, Two Heroes. This series taking after What If Deku Was a Power Ranger, to go along with the My Hero Academia movie storyline covering the first movie. This is something that I think a lot of you guys have been looking forward to for a while now, me as well. After a long time of writing and getting everything together, I hope that I have created a story that you guys will enjoy for the most part. And speaking of Power Rangers series, please check out the trailer video that came out earlier today for the Power Ranger Heroes of the Morphing Grid series, The Star of Hope. That is going to be a series that will be coming out next week and will run parallel with the My Hero Academia storyline. With that being said, I do hope you guys look forward to everything that is to come now and in the future with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. And to not keep you guys waiting, we're going to get straight into this video. So, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All Might, Deku, and Alpha would be flying on a plane. Deku would be unsure as to where they were going. All Might sleeping and reminiscing of days lost, remembering his younger years when he traveled to the United States for more training in his road to becoming the true symbol of peace, remarking all of the adventures and the friends he had made along the way. But now, time had now changed, and he found himself surrounded by new companions, those being of the young Izuku Midoriya, as well as the lovable robotic sidekick Alpha 6. A lot had changed in this universe, mainly being the fact that this Alpha bot had escaped from a cruel and horrific fate. At the cost of his friends, he had escaped the tyranny of Lord Dragon, the former ally to the Rangers, now turned enemy, who had now enslaved his world and wanted to enslave many more. However, despite all of that, he had grown to make new friends along the way. A new team of Rangers have been established, albeit except for one more, and now they continue to grow stronger day by day. Deku, not only in his goals to become the #1 hero of his world, but to also protect his world from the threats that might come, whether that be from home or from the stars. As All Might would awaken, he and Izuku would look out of the plane to see Eye Island, the floating city that housed many of the world's bright and shining scientists, who revamped and worked in many of the new evolutions, that being quirk-based in the world that they had come from. As Deku were excited, although a bit nervous at the idea of being invited by All Might would reassure the young hero that he were more than qualified to come along, stating that he wasn't just bringing Deku along just out of kindness, but also because Deku was the most familiar with Alpha. Alpha was going to be seen by a personal friend of All Might, as they wanted to get some more help and input when it came to the business of the Rangers. As they would prepare to land, All Might would tell Deku that he were free to use his morpher here, as it would work as his hero costume, asking if he were able to take off the helmet safely. Alpha would assure him that Deku could simply reform and deform the helmet at will, as a special switch had been placed on the morpher for him to do so. With that being said, Deku would then go through the morph, turning into the Green Ranger, as All Might would enter into his hero costume and the two would deboard the plane, making their way to Eye Island down below. Deku would be taken aback by many of the sights, seeing everything along the city, from the carnivals and the fanfare to the many unique and creative devices, as well as seeing other pro heroes from all around. All Might would remark that everyone were mostly excited for the upcoming expo, as fans would swarm and gather around the #1 hero and his protege. While on the trip, All Might would tell Deku to keep the secrets of One for All on the low, stating that the more who knew about it, the more dangerous it could be. Even among the Rangers, only 3 of them actually knew of the secrets of One for All, that being the Black Ranger, Todoroki, the Red Ranger, Bakugo, and the Green Ranger himself, Izuku Midoriya. As they would soon get away from the fans and find a quiet place to rest, a young girl on a pogo stick would jump down below as she would yell out to All Might, referring to him as Uncle All Might, before running to give the colossal hero a great big hug, as she hadn't seen him in a while. The young girl would reveal herself to be Melissa Shield, the daughter of All Might's good friend, David Shield, and that she had called them there as a surprise, not just for the expo, but for a chance for her father to see an old friend, someone who he hadn't really connected with in such a long time. Melissa would also be taken aback by Deku in his hero costume, remarking how unique and stylish the suit looked, as well as asking what was that strange robotic-like backpack that he had on his back. Deku would quickly take off Alpha as it would be hovering in his drone form, introducing himself as Alpha 6, Melissa being awestruck by the little device and whatever technologies that he housed within him, asking many questions about where he had come from and what exactly was it. Deku would simply play it off and state that he were his support item, so to speak, that being the cover that had been given for Deku as he would carry Alpha with him throughout the expo. Melissa being happy to see another inventor like herself, as Deku would have to explain that he didn't actually build Alpha. Alpha was just more of a sidekick to him than anything else, but still a close friend to have nonetheless. In a laboratory far above, David Shield would be going over final preparations before the expo, along with his close friend and assistant Sam. They had much to discuss, and David had not gotten much sleep in the meantime, as a lot were going to be happening tonight, a lot that could tire out any man. However, his mood would soon change as his daughter Melissa would arrive, giving her father a big hug and telling him not to work so hard, knowing that he often pushed himself past his very limits. As David would assure his young daughter that he would try his best not to do so, he would soon be greeted by an even bigger surprise, as All Might would come barging into the room, giving his old friend a hug as they had not seen each other in quite a while. Deku, being introduced to David Shield also, would geek out and fanboy at the man who had been responsible for much of All Might's earlier successes, remarking the costumes that David had personally designed, going as far back as the Bronze and Silver Age and even into the Golden Age itself. David being pleasured at the idea of his work being recognized by someone so young, as Deku had to stop himself. David would also be taken aback by the young drone that was flying beside Deku, as Alpha would fly over to introduce himself, revealing himself as Alpha 6. David wondering just who had built such an amazing contraption. All Might would state that they would have to have a private conversation about that, and would ask if the 2 kids would be okay with traveling on their own. Melissa more than eager to, as she would take Deku to go and explore the island, walking about and seeing the other things, as well as getting to know one another, leaving the 2 adults time alone to catch up, not just about All Might's current status, but also about a new situation that had now arisen in the world. Melissa and Deku would walk about Eye Island, exploring many of the smaller expos and tourist attractions, seeing many of the new inventions and hero gear that had been invented. Melissa asking questions about Deku and his quirk, as well as any other powers that he might have, and learning as much as she could about Alpha, or as much as they were willing to say for the most part, as Deku had been given strict orders not to unveil any of the major secrets, only to say the basics that he had been taught from UA, as they didn't want the world to become alarmed at the potential idea of an interdimensional hostile takeover, to say the least. As they would make their way around the area, exploring many new and unseen inventions that had not been unveiled to the public, Eye Island being the major forefront bearer when it came to new and innovative technologies, many secrets being kept far from the world, as this island that was continuously moving was funded by the world governments in order to keep such secrets away from prying eyes. As they would continue their walk and make their way through the many other smaller expos, unknown to Deku, he would soon run into some unexpected classmates, turning around to see Uraraka with a distinct look on her face, wondering why Deku were here of all people and why he were with a girl. Deku quickly blushing and hiding and keeping to himself as Alpha tried to warn him that he could sense the other Rangers' signatures here, although he too were curious to wonder as to how all of them had arrived. As Deku would look up once again, he would see Yaoyorozu as well as Jiro there as well, the two girls remarking that they were here for the expo also. Deku surprised to see all of them having made it. Melissa would offer to take everyone out to go get a drink and have a bit of a cool down, the girls having small talk and getting to know one another, while Deku and Alpha would simply sit down under a shady tree to themselves. Eventually they would be met by even more UA students, that being in the form of Kaminari and Mineta. This being the first time that anyone had seen Mineta since he had dropped out of the hero course. Mineta remarking that going into the marketing aspect of hero work was just as important and also less dangerous, although he and Kaminari still remained good friends, and they had decided to spend their summer break working at the expo. Also, since he was in marketing when it came to summer vacation, he would probably be here a little bit longer anyway, mainly because since he wasn't in the hero course, he didn't have to take hero course classes, so general studies had basically wrapped up everything for him, so he would have an extended summer vacation, unlike the other heroes who, in a few weeks, would have to be going on some sort of training camp or whatever it was called. As the three boys were catching up, soon another surprise would make his presence known, as the hero known as Ingenium, aka Tenya Ida, the class representative, would soon come swarming through, telling Mineta and Kaminari not to slack off in their work. Deku also being shocked and wondering why Ida of all people were here, although Ida would explain that since his family had great influence, it was only natural that they would be invited, Yaoyorozu staying the same as she were also the representative for her family at the expo, as all the ranger candidates would slowly gather together once again, that being Deku, Ida, Uraraka, and Yaoyorozu, remarking that it was kind of a coincidence that all of the rangers were here all of a sudden. Alpha's detection would go off once again, stating that yet another ranger had made himself present. As the four would look at one another, they would ask Alpha just who this ranger could be, although it wouldn't take very long for them to figure out, as large red explosions could be seen in the distance, and it wasn't very long for them to figure out just who the ranger was. Making their way over to the obstacle course, they would see the Red Ranger in his full glory, blasting away with his explosions, shooting at all the robotic villains on the course, along with Kirishima, who was competing as well. As Deku would yell out to the others, Bakugo would jump over the railings in a rage, asking what that damn nerd was doing here, he of all people, and Four Eyes too. Kirishima trying to calm down Bakugo as he would explain that since Bakugo came in first during the sports festival, he had gotten 2 tickets to go, so they decided to come to the expo anyway. As Bakugo went through the course, using his ranger power no less, he would end up having the fastest time at around 10 seconds, stating that no one was going to top him, although Deku did want to try. Bakugo would just yell at Deku to get his turn over with and get out of here, since he didn't want to see him on his time off. Melissa would be intrigued to see just what Deku could do, as well as wondering why both he and Bakugo had similar hero costumes, albeit they were different colors and they had a different animal motif for the helmet, and Deku's costume had a shield and with some golden trim, but you could have honestly stated that if you take the golden trim off, their costumes look exactly alike. Alpha trying his best to act inconspicuous and not reveal their secrets. as Deku would step forward and prepare himself for the obstacle course, channeling his green flame throughout his entire body as he would morph his helmet onto his head and prepare to go for it all. Deku would launch himself into the air with his green flame, overlooking the entire obstacle course before shooting back down like a green fireball, blasting away all of his enemies in quick succession, slashing a few of them away with the dragon dagger, before eventually finishing off the remaining villains with a dragon shot. His time coming at around 13 seconds, coming in second just behind Bakugo, who would be pissed off to think that Deku could be so close to him. He would yell out to the announcer that he wanted to try again, and that this time he wasn't going to come anywhere close to that loser. However, both the boys would be quickly outstaged, as within less than 5 seconds, a large wall of ice would encase the entire surrounding area, defeating all of the villains and gaining the #1 spot. As the two Rangers would turn, they would see their final Ranger counterpart, that being the Black Ranger himself, Shoto Todoroki. Momo Yaoyorozu being extremely happy to see that Todoroki were here, and also that Todoroki had won and came in first place. Uraraka cheering for Deku, telling him that he could just do his best and try again next time. Bakugo yelling out enraged for the fact that Icy had shown up to take his spot, and that nerd Deku were here as well, asking just what in the hell all the other Rangers were doing here in the first place, as the boys would go to try to calm Bakugo down. Melissa now being a bit intrigued, wondering just what a Ranger was. Meanwhile, back in the labs, David would be testing All Might's body, and the signs wouldn't be looking so good. Thankfully, All Might had not given up One for All just yet, so his body still maintained the 3 to 3.5 hours worth of hero work, but still his quirk levels were dropping dramatically, and David could estimate that within a year or so, they would drop to a critical low, remarking that even with his fight with All for One, he didn't think that it would be this bad. All Might trying to reassure David that everything would be fine and that there was nothing to worry about. However, David would not feel the same. He would be worried that the world would lose its symbol of peace. Since All Might had taken the center stage, villainy all around the world had gone down. Japan dramatically to only 7%, and even for the United States, crime had only dropped to 20% as a whole. But that was all attributed to All Might in and of itself. If the world lost All Might, there's no telling what it could lead to. However, All Might would reassure his friend that everything were going to be fine, that no matter what happened, the world would not lose its symbol of peace so easily. And even still, he should learn to look to the future and see that the future itself could hold the answers more than they ever could. As the sun was beginning to set and the day was coming to an end, Melissa and the others would reconvene at the juice bar, seeing a tired Mineta and Kaminari. Melissa, taking pity on them, would give them 2 extra tickets that she had to the expo if they wanted to come along. Everyone being told to meet at the entrance at a formal time and to make sure that they were in their formal attires, as everyone would split off to get dressed and ready for the party. Deku and Alpha would be told by Melissa to visit one of her research labs, as she had been watching how they had been competing during the obstacle course, and she thought she had a tool that might be useful to Deku. As they would make their way over to the research labs, Deku would learn about Melissa's backstory, Melissa telling Deku about how she had wanted to be a hero, but that sadly she learned from a young age that she was quirkless, similar to Deku himself. All Might would be an inspiration to the two of them when they were younger, about the type of heroes that they wanted to be, although in her case, it seemed as though things didn't pan out the way she wanted them to. Deku would remark that her situation was very similar to his own. In fact, the only reason he had even gained a quirk was due to the Morphing Grid's unique abilities. He even began to ponder if maybe she had such latent talent. If she were to ever become a ranger, who knows what type of quirk she might possess herself. However, Melissa would state that even if she couldn't be a direct hero, being like her father would be enough for her, as she would hand Deku a special device. It would be known as the Power Gauntlet, something that could be used to help the body endure great pain and use their quirk to their absolute limit. However, the reason why she had given it to Deku primarily was because she noticed that his flames were probably not as potent as they could have been. Alpha even remarking that despite Deku's suit, his flames could still be the upper limit of his abilities, but that power gauntlet could come in handy if he ever didn't have his ranger powers. Maybe building some for his arms and legs where his flames were the most potent, they could probably do him some good. After all, he never knew when he would or wouldn't have his suit to protect him. Deku would take the power gauntlet and thank Melissa for her assistance, as the two would go their separate ways to get dressed for that evening's expo. Soon everyone would gather at the entrance, Ida yelling at Deku for being late and Deku stating that he had to apologize, but his original suit had gotten damaged for some reason and he had to go pick up a new one. The only thing they had left was a suit that was green. However, as he looked over at a lot of the others, including his ranger counterparts, he couldn't help but get this weird feeling. Alpha being a bit nostalgic, thinking of the fact that the rangers from his old world would always wear clothes that were similar to their ranger colors, as they could see Ida in a blue suit, Todoroki in a black suit, Uraraka in a pink dress, Yaoyorozu in a yellow dress. And while Bakugo and Kaminari were late, unknown to them, Bakugo were wearing a red shirt with his suit also, so it seemed as though everyone were matching. As Melissa would come through with a pretty white dress of her own, she would ask if everyone were ready to go for the expo dinner. However, just before they could enter, the room would go into automatic lockdown, as the PA system would announce that a bomb had been detected on the island, and that the island was going into lockdown effective in 10 minutes, telling everyone to get off the streets and go to their residential areas, to stay where they were put and to not come out until the crisis was evaded. Unknown to the young heroes, hostages were being taken in the main building, as the heroes were being tied up and bound. A strange-looking villain with a metal mask, referring to himself only as Wolfram, along with armed gunmen, would take everyone hostage, holding them down and stating that they were in control of the island now, and that if anyone were to make any sudden movements, the citizens would be the first to die, All Might being left in a compromising position, as now the entire island had been taken hostage. Communication would be cut off for everyone in the island. However, the only communicators that could work were the Rangers communicators that were connected back to Alpha, who would be entering into his drone form as he hovered over the city, locking on to the Rangers' locations and stating that he was going to meet with them as soon as possible. Deku alerting him to the situation as the students would see that the villains had taken the city hostage, and also All Might had been locked away. With everyone debating what they should do in the meantime, they would now be left in an even more conflicting situation. Despite being young heroes and not having a pro license, they would remark that they did have these special powers, which meant that they were more than the average hero. Deku would remember a conversation that he had with All Might, as well as Mr. Aizawa before leaving, remarking that their status as Rangers put them in a unique position, at least as far as the school was concerned. Those morphers were basically a pro license in and of itself, not in the sense that they could go and do whatever they wanted, but in terms of acting in self-defense, they more than had permission to do so, never knowing when a threat might come, whether it were a threat from their own world or a threat from another. As the Rangers of the group would ponder what they should do, Deku would decide that it was up to them to save the city, knowing that there was no one else that could do so. They had the power and were more than capable. They just had to be willing to do it. While Ida would be fervently against it, even he cannot argue with Deku's logic. Todoroki echoing the similar sentiment, remarking that they had the power to do something, and that they couldn't turn and do nothing at all. As Alpha would state that he were hovering above the building, he would scan through its schematics to find a tiny vent, stating that if he flew through it, he could soon arrive to their location, telling Deku to wait at the tiny vent over to the left-hand corner of the room that they were in. Deku, along with the others, would pull away at the vent's doors, waiting for a few moments as they would hear a tiny buzz, and soon the drone-shaped Alpha would make his appearance, turning himself into backpack mode and sitting alongside Deku's shoulders. As Deku would prop him up on his back, he would turn to the others and ask them what they wanted to do, everyone agreeing that they needed to go out and save the citizens. However, Mineta would be a bit conflicted here. He had specifically gotten out of the hero course to avoid this type of situation. He didn't really think that he should be getting involved at all. He wasn't like the rest of them. The other members of the group would agree, and Jiro would remark that she could stay back here as long as she had a way to communicate. Deku giving her his Morpher communicator to allow her to send in word to them in case anything were to happen, along with Kaminari, who would feel that it would be for the best to stay with Mineta and Jiro and hold things down from the ground. Since they were in a room that couldn't be seen or detected anyways, they would be better off here close to the other pro heroes. With that, all of the rangers of the group would get into sequence, morphing at once as Melissa would see firsthand what they could do. As All Might would look back up to Deku, transformed and ready to go. While All Might didn't want Deku to get involved, he knew very well that it was only within the nature of a hero to act without thinking, noting firsthand that if he were in his situation, he would probably do the same thing as well. While Jiro, Kaminari, and Mineta would stay behind, Ida, Momo, Uraraka, Deku, and Todoroki would go forward. They would protect Melissa as they would make their way to the top, getting to the command center to undo the hostage lockdown, to put back the drones, and to undo what the villains had done, freeing the heroes and allowing them to save the day. The Morph Rangers moved quickly up the stairwell, the only place in the building that couldn't be locked down, although they had to move discreetly as not to be detected. Using Uraraka's gravity quirk, they were able to make themselves weightless, and using their immense speed and power, they moved like blurs of light up the stairwell, until eventually they reached the 80th floor. Making their way to the botanical gardens, they would walk through slowly as they could see the elevator moving its way up to their surface. As the students would quickly go into hiding, not knowing if who would come out of the elevator would be an enemy or an ally, they would see two villains making their way out, wondering if they were going to have to fight in this situation. It wouldn't take long as they could hear two familiar voices from the other side, that being Bakugo and Kirishima. Deku slapping his face and wondering what the two were doing up here, Ida remarking that they couldn't have gotten that lost. As the villains would confront the two boys, asking what they were doing, Kirishima would try to play it off, but the villains wouldn't be having it. However, before they could go in for an attack, they would be stopped by a wall of ice. Todoroki taking the lead as Bakugo could see that the situation must have been that dire. Pulling out his morpher as well, he would morph into the Red Ranger, as the Red and Black Ranger would stand side by side to face the villains. One short and stubby one who would transform into a large purplish monster, and the other one rather scrawny, who had a bird-like ability to control the winds. As the 2v2 battle would begin, along with Kirishima aiding where he could, the added boost of the Rangers would make them more than a match for the average villains, taking them out swiftly as they would all reconvene. Kirishima asking what was going on, they would explain the situation at hand. When Kirishima asked if where were the other members of the party, They would explain that Kaminari, Jiro, and Mineta were down below, serving as their eyes and ears to see if anything were coming, as well as serving on the defensive. Kirishima remarking that they were probably going to need some defensive power. He would agree to go back down there and overlook the others, protecting them while telling the others to make their way up to the top. The Rangers would agree as Kirishima would make his way back down to the other students. With all the Rangers now together, Melissa seeing their costumes all very similar, she now had even more questions, wondering just who exactly were they. With no time to lose, the team would storm and make their way up to the higher echelons of the building. The villains now seeing firsthand that the students were getting involved, and seeing that they were in hero costumes, they knew that they had to have something fierce. As the drones and other villains would be sent to slow them down, soon one by one, the villains would slow down the Rangers, eventually to the point where Deku would have to go on alone, with both Alpha and Melissa, while they would hold off the other villains, as well as being warned not to let the servers be destroyed, as they were the only way to help shut down the hostage situation on the island. Ida and the other Rangers would take up a defensive position to slow down and stop the drones, as they would soon make their way up to the top, telling Deku to protect Melissa, as he and Alpha, as well as young Melissa, would make their way to the top. As they did so, making their way to the private vault floor of the main building, Melissa and Deku would overhear a conversation that they wished they hadn't heard. They would hear David talking to his assistant Sam, as they were undoing the locks to retrieve a device that had been stolen from them long ago. A quirk amplifier with no side effects that can make one's quirk more stronger than before. Remarking that a long time ago it had been taken from them by the world government. Deemed too dangerous, it was locked away along with all of their research. David had remarked that he had wanted his machine back to give it to All Might to aid him in his hero work. As Melissa would hear the conversation, she would be saddened and disappointed in her father for what he had done. David trying to explain that he had done everything with the best of intentions, that he merely wanted to help and save All Might, stating that his days as a hero were practically numbered, and that the world needed the symbol of peace. Deku could understand these sentiments. For a long time, the world's peace, it all depended on All Might being around. Even he, for as young as he was, understood that if All Might were not here, the world could be plunged into darkness once again. And knowing the secrets of One for All, as well as the injury that All Might had sustained from his fight against All for One 5 years ago, he knew for sure that All Might was not just looking for another successor for no reason, but that deep down his body was breaking day by day, and that sooner or later he would have nothing left to give, and he may potentially fall, and the world would fall along with him. As Wolfram would enter into the room, he would smile and thank the young doctors for their assistance, before shooting Sam and retrieving the device for himself. David would be left in shock, wondering what were going on, thinking that they had only hired fake villains. But no, they had in fact hired real villains, and that this was a double cross. They had been hired specifically to steal this device, and that David's plan simply made it easier for them to do so. As Wolfram would attempt to shoot down and kill Sam once and for all, David would step in the way of his assistant, taking the bullet, Melissa yelling out, scared for her father's safety. As Deku would look to try to undo the damage that had been done, Wolfram would use his quirk to control metal and bind the Green Ranger to the wall, holding him in place so as not to interfere, as he would look through and decide that now was the time to kill any potential witnesses. Deku would break free from his restraints, green flames emitting from all over his body as he would yell at the villain to get away from Melissa. He would shoot out green torrents as they would go and fly straight towards the metal poles that Wolfram were controlling. As the Green Ranger and Wolfram would engage in battle, Deku would take out his dragon dagger, slicing away at the debris of metal that flew around him, burning it to ash and trying his best to get close to the villain, but he would be kept at a distance as he would be pushed away over and over again. Soon the other Rangers would arrive as well, but by then Wolfram would have already escaped, taking David along with him as well as the device, creating walls and barriers to keep them at bay, as Melissa and Alpha would work to go and undo the lockdown programming. Melissa would ask Alpha if there were anything that she were not being told, Alpha deciding that now would be the time. He would decide to tell her the truth about the Power Rangers, about what Deku's power truly was, and how he had obtained it for himself. This would shock Melissa, changing her complete concept and view of the Ranger powers, not knowing what they were or what they were truly capable of. In the meantime, Deku would break free from the binds as he would make his way over to the helicopter landing pads to see Wolfram taking David as they were preparing to escape. He would blast away at the helicopter, trying to get David back, soon shooting himself straight into the air and holding on to the side of the helicopter once again. As Wolfram would start to rain down bullets, Deku's helmet would crack slowly, but it would still remain, the bullets not being enough to pierce his hero costume, but amplified by Wolfram's own quirk, they were slowly starting to take their toll, as Deku would continue to try to blast flame, not wanting to crash the helicopter with David inside as he would reach out for him, David being left in his own despair for everything that had happened up until now, and Wolfram more than eager to feed on that insecurity. He would continue to punch and shoot away at Deku, until eventually Deku's hand would slip and he would fall, blasting himself back into the air, desperate to save Melissa's father. The lockdown programming would be undone and the heroes would take out the villains quickly, as All Might would rush to save his old friend. Moving at blinding speeds, almost similar to his prime, he would shoot high in the sky, far above even Deku, as he would deliver a cross-arm smash, blasting away at the helicopter before jumping in to save David, as he and Deku would fall back to the ground, the other Rangers quickly arriving to check and see if everyone were alright. A great monstrosity of metal would start to congeal around Wolfram, who had now taken the quirk-amplifying device, attaching it to himself and feeling the power course within him. He would soon have complete control over miles upon miles worth of metal, building and constructing a large monstrosity and beast, as large tendrils of metal would begin to swarm all around the Rangers, slapping away and hitting them all with such force and authority that they would all begin to fall out of their Ranger forms, as they would crash into the ground, Deku looking around to see his comrades injured and in pain. He would attempt to jump and blast away at Wolfram, but it would prove to be useless, as Wolfram's quirk would prove to be too overbearing, and he would smash Deku back into the ground, knocking him out of Ranger form as well. Melissa would look on horrified at what were happening to her friends, to her father, to her Uncle All Might, the destruction and pain surrounding everyone around her. She wanted to save them. She wanted to do something, but she were quirkless. She had no powers, no abilities. What could she do to aid her comrades? That was when Alpha would turn to her, telling her that she had a chance, that they were desperate and they needed all the firepower they could get if they were going to win this fight, as he would unveil the final morpher within his body. All Might would see the destruction that was happening around him, desperate not to let it happen again. He would jump into the air with his full strength, smashing away at Wolfram's constructions, getting close to the villain, but soon being restrained, as Wolfram would grab at All Might's abdomen, squeezing it in the area that had been damaged from his fight with All for One. As All Might would cough up blood, Wolfram would laugh at his despair before realizing a dark and terrible secret. He was using more than one quirk, but there was no way he could have gotten multiple quirks unless he had come into contact with him. Wolfram would simply confirm what All Might was fearing, stating that he had been given this mission by that man in particular, that he had been given his additional quirk, and that he was given the goal to end the symbol of peace once and for all, that would simply serve as a bonus to the thievery. Wolfram would take great pleasure, not just in selling his device, but for selling the device that was used to kill the symbol of peace, the #1 hero, All Might. As All Might would cough up more blood before being thrown to the ground, he would soon see as another wave of metal would start to fall upon him. Deku, albeit unmorphed, was not going to give up now. Neither he nor the other Rangers, as they would combine whatever power they had left to destroy the debris around them. As All Might would ask the kids what they were doing, they would state that they too were heroes, and that this was their world to protect. No matter who the enemy was, whether it be a common criminal, whether it be Lord Draken himself, they had taken the pledge to be Rangers, and that now was the time for them to live up to that pledge. They were going to fight beside All Might till the end. As the Rangers would all convene back together, Alpha would hover above them and state that they were getting reinforcements. As the group would turn, they would see Melissa walking over to the rest of them, and they would see in her hand a morpher. The others would be completely shocked, not knowing that the last morpher would be given to her. All Might would be just as shocked, not thinking that she too would also become a Ranger as well, wanting to talk her out of it, as he didn't want to put his own niece in danger. But Melissa would state that that was her father, and she wanted to help save him. And she believed that she could be a hero too, and she didn't want to lose this chance. All Might knew that he couldn't win 7-1, seeing the determined look on all of those kids' faces. It really did make him angry sometimes, not knowing when to give up, not knowing when to quit. These kids, they could be reckless, they could be arrogant, sometimes just downright foolish. But sometimes, that's what makes a hero. As he would look back to the rest of them, he would take a deep breath as he would ask, "Will you Rangers lend me your aid in this fight?" All 7 would yell out an affirmative yes, as he would tell them it's time to suit up. Alpha would look on in amazement as he would see the 7 students all gathered together again, standing and fighting as one. It was almost as if it were a dream come true. Alpha would even look up to the sky, asking if Zordon could see what were happening now. The Rangers had finally returned. As Deku would step forward, everyone else behind him, everyone at the ready, he would yell, "It's morphin' time!" The 7 getting into position as the roll call would begin. Tyrannosaurus, Mastodon, Saber-toothed Tiger, Triceratops, Pterodactyl, White Tiger, Dragon Zord. The 7 would be emitted in glows of blue, red, black, yellow, pink, white, and green. All 7 morphing together as one, and now revealing that the Power Rangers were once again reassembled. Wolfram would laugh at the 7 Rangers, stating that light show would not be enough to defeat him, as he would send wave after wave of giant metal cubes to destroy them once and for all. Bakugo and Todoroki would take the first wave, their power sword as well as the power axe at the ready, destroying the large amounts of metal with their own power. Ida using his reciprocal burst as white flames would emit from his engines, kicking away at the debris, as well as Momo Yaoyorozu using the speed of the saber-toothed tiger. She would start to create bombs that would emit from her body using her creation quirk, the bombs quickly latching onto the debris and blowing them away, as Uraraka would fly in the skies with the power of the pterodactyl, using her power bow to blow away as well as the monster's power. Deku and Melissa would be running side by side, Melissa feeling the power emanating from her body. It felt exhilarating. She felt as though she were being rechanged, re-evolved. As she would look to see what her power could be, a large debris of metal would start to be over them. Deku would only catch at the last moment, and he would feel as though it would be too late. However, he would be pulled out of the way instantly. Melissa, reaching out her hands desperately, she could feel that her arm was starting to stretch, as if it were entirely elastic, before pulling Deku out of the way. Deku remarking in joy, stating that she had a quirk now. As Melissa's arm would become retractable, she would see that her quirk was elastic. It must have been from her father, as he had a quirk that could basically stretch his fingers. Her quirk must have been an evolution of that, and her whole body was basically elastic, and she could stretch and move it at will, and shape it into anything she wished. As she and Deku would look forward, All Might would stand in front of them, asking the two to aid and assist him in this battle. All Might would rush forward, Deku to his right and Melissa to his left. Deku instructing Melissa on how to summon her weapon. She would concentrate and summon it forth. In another dimension, Lord Draken was continuing his conquest, his sword Saba in his hand. As he went to bring it down for the final strike, Saba would disappear from his side instantly, Draken wondering what on earth could have happened. In that brief lapse in judgment, Draken would be struck by an attack and sent flying, as he would summon another weapon to his side and quickly take down the villains. But he would now be angered, wondering who had taken Saba away from him. Saba would then emerge in Melissa's hands, the dragon-like sword remarking what had happened, stating that he must have been re-summoned, that he was now in the presence of a new hero. Melissa wondering how on earth she had a talking sword of all things. Deku telling her that they would have to talk about that later, but that now they had to take out the oncoming waves. The two Rangers would work together, Melissa following Deku's movements, albeit a bit uncoordinated, but still with heart and determination. The two would slash away at the tendrils, creating a path for All Might to go through. As All Might would summon all the powers of One for All within his body, and Deku summoning the power of his green flame as well, the two shining brightly, stars in the sky itself. They would live up to the words and the affirmation that they had lived by, the words of their alma maters, the words of a true hero, to go beyond, to go plus ultra. As All Might would deliver a Detroit smash, Deku would combine his power to deliver the Dragon Shot. As a beam of bright white and a beam of shining green would swirl together straight at Wolfram, blasting away and freeing David, as Melissa would use her quirk to catch her father in the air and bring him back down to her side. David, only briefly, seeing and within the visor, the eyes of his baby girl. As she would hold him to the side, she would state that she had to go and help the others now, but that she would be back. As Wolfram would be collecting himself, aiming for one final strike, Alpha would speak into the communicators, telling them that their weapons needed to be combined into one, and that only there could they destroy it all in one shot. The Rangers would then get to work, Todoroki using his power axe as the base of the gun, Uraraka sending out her power bow, Ida sending out his power lance, Momo Yaoyorozu sending out her power daggers, Deku combining with the dragon dagger as well as Saba placed at the end, and Bakugo with his power sword. The 7 weapons of the Rangers had now been combined into one, as All Might stood behind them, sending the vestiges of One for All into the weapon. It would glow and shine a bright and blazing color. As the beam would all congeal into one, the Rangers would take their positions, as All Might would yell, to go beyond, to go plus ultra, as the Rangers would send out the final Ranger Flash, as the beam would be blasted directly at Wolfram. He would create a defensive barrier, but it would prove to be futile, as the heroes and their fighting spirit would all congeal into one, blasting away at the defense, destroying the mighty metal tower, and defeating the villain once and for all. As the Rangers would slowly step away from the attack, everyone would demorph, now being completely tired and drained, albeit happy though. As David would slowly come back to his feet, All Might would stand beside him, resting his old friend and making sure that he were okay. David would apologize for what had happened, for being foolish and not seeing things as All Might had, remarking that the future was right in front of him the whole time, but that he just was too blind to see it. As he could see his daughter showing off her new quirk and abilities to the others, who would be amazed, Melissa would smile brightly and happily, a smile that he loved to see. All Might would be happy for her as well, and he would remark that the world would be in safe hands, that in the future, even if they didn't have one symbol of peace, instead, they had 7 pillars, 7 who could work together as one, and together they could bring a new era of peace into the world. This concludes What If Deku Was a Power Ranger, the movie, Two Heroes. Thank you to everyone who has shown massive support for the channel. We are on the road to 1K and beyond. Thank you to everyone who has been enjoying the series so far and everything else on PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Please don't forget to check out the trailer video for the next series in the Heroes of the Morphing Grid saga. That is where we're going to take another Power Ranger team and combine them with a very popular anime. An anime that I know a lot of you guys will probably enjoy. So please check out that trailer. It's going to be the video right before this one. It's Power Rangers, Heroes of the Morphing Grid, the Star of Hope. So check that out. Stay tuned for that and everything else that is to come now and in the future. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of this video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing out, and I'll see you next time.